welcome to the Internal Mobility Podcast, where we explore all of the ways for you to reach your potential here at Randstad while also making this giant company a little easier to know and understand. Today, our guest is Trey Warrix. Welcome, Trey.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. Anthony and I were having a conversation about how to support our people with internal mobility. And she shared with me that you have crossed lines of business 3 times in your career here at Randstad. So I really want to hear your story. I know it's going to be useful for somebody. Tell me about your journey here at Randstad.
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone's is unique, right? But I always enjoy talking about mine. So I actually, I ended up at Randstad not to work as an internal employee. I walked in the doors of Randstad to go to work at a steel mill. I had just moved to the area, and I knew someone who worked at this steel processing plant, and he was like, go to Randstad. That's where we get all of our temp employees from. And it was just supposed to be this interim until I figured out what I was going to do, right? And when I walked in the door there, obviously I did not have any experience in that field, so. Whoever was behind the desk definitely did a good job not placing me there, but it turned out that they had an opening as a recruiter. And I actually got a call on my way home from dropping off my resume there, and interviewed later that week, and ultimately ended up starting as a TOU, is what we called it at the time, right? A temp recruiter in the branch. And I was in that role for only about 6 weeks, and I was offered a position as a staffing consultant. Staffing manager, I believe, would be the equivalent title these days. But I was in the staffing manager role for some time in the branch, and obviously learning our business and meeting a lot of people. So in that role as a staffing manager, went through new hire onboarding, which is near and dear to me, especially now in my new role, which we'll get to later. But I did a lot of networking in that new hire program. Was one of the most incredible experiences. We had an awesome group of people, and still to this day, I still talk to some of those people. Some of them are still at Randstad, some of them aren't, across the country in various different fields. I think one's in the insurance field now, and you just build lasting relationships. So went through the new hire onboarding, obviously, and worked my way up in the branch. I was an assistant branch manager, and we had really good years. We had some peak TW years. We had some huge growth during that time. But ultimately, I ended up getting an offer from a former KDM at one of our old clients. She had moved on to a new company that was not using any temporary staffing and needed somebody in HR. Made me an offer. And, when I looked at what my options were at Randstad, I didn't really have a clear vision of what that looked like, right? I wasn't sure really outside of my own little operating reality, like, okay, I'm an assistant branch manager now, and my next step is to be a branch manager, and then the AVP title is after that, and so on and so forth, right? And you start looking around at the district and all the tenure, and it's like, what does that really look like? And is it realistic, right? So I wasn't really sure. I knew that I loved what I did. I loved the people that I worked with. I loved Randstad. But I also wanted to grow my career, and this seemed like an opportunity to do that. So I ultimately made the very hard decision to leave Randstad. And ironically enough, we were filling a huge order for one of our customers on my very last day, and my IT access got shut off as I was placing a pallet. So yeah, it was a good time. Literally worked right up to the last second there. It was it was a good time. But so I went to work for this other company, and I was there in HR for about 4.5 months. And I got a call from Anthony, who I'd never worked with in the past. I had no knowledge of who she was in the company, or really RIS or in-house at all. I knew that we did it, but that was really the extent of what I knew. But she reached out to me and she said, hey, I reached out to all of my mass customized partners, and I'm looking for a workforce consultant, and your name came up from Darlene Olson. And she said that I should reach out to you. You'd recently left the company. You were looking for something more, and I want to talk to you about this opportunity. Knowing nothing about in-house, obviously I was excited, but I was also, I was nervous, right? So I was in a position that I liked and enjoyed, but I, I still loved Randstad, right? I'd had a great experience here for, I think, 6+ years at that point. Um, and, I always made the joke, like, bleed blue, right? So
Mhm.
I met with Anthony a couple of times, and ultimately, she made me an offer to come back to Randstad in the in-house world, and I didn't regret it for a single second. It was one of the best moves that I made in my career. So came back to Randstad as a workforce consultant, um, and worked through that. Senior workforce consultant, area vice president, senior area vice president, and once again, not necessarily looking to make a change. I found this opportunity in the business knowledge group, and once again, very tough decision. I loved what I was doing in-house. I loved my team, and I mean, most of them I brought on, right? And most of the customers at that point, we sold together or we grew together, and it was a really tough decision. But ultimately, looking at, again, what I wanted to do with my career and the type of impact that I wanted to have, it seemed like the right move to make. So I reached out to Anthony and talked to her about it and got her blessing, moved forward with that. And now I've been on the business knowledge team as a senior director for, I think, 5 weeks now, something like that. So that's
Wow.
kind of the 30-second commercial. That's a little longer than that, right? But that's the abridged version of the path.
But what an incredible story. You came in for our support to be placed.
Yeah.
And look at you now, like 3 different experiences and lots of promotions, obviously. Like, wow. I think sometimes it's really hard for our people to make the connection outside of their area. Like, I heard you say networking. Like, is that what you would attribute your success to? Just being connected to lots of people so that when Anthony's looking for a workforce consultant, she's like, who do you know? And you came up.
Yeah, I think it's definitely networking, but it's not just knowing a lot of people, right? It's being authentic in those relationships. I will never forget. I only met Darlene maybe 2 or 3 different times, but I'll never forget sitting in the branch. She was sitting across the desk from me, and we were having a conversation, and the phone rang, and there was no one else to answer the phone. Everyone was on the phone, and I said, "Excuse me, I have to grab this," and I answered the phone while we were mid conversation. Um, in the moment, I wasn't sure that was the right thing to do, but I'm fairly certain afterwards that it was, right, because I love this partner for talent, right? Because we've really been that for so long, right? When that phone rings, that's money, right? That's GM. That's potentially a life that we can change. There's a lot of different ways to look at it, but I think just being authentic, and that was me, right? Because I was walking in the door as a temp, right? I was just looking for work, and I have always just connected with that on a pretty deep level. So I think, yeah, networking for sure, being authentic, and trying to find a way to add value, right? How can I add value to this person's experience, whether it's someone that's higher up in the chain or maybe not quite as far in the chain. I always make the reference of, like, making deposits now so that you can make those withdrawals later, and I think that goes a long way.
Yeah, it's an apt analogy. It's great. So, partner for talent, like, it's like all over your story. Like, do you have any recent examples that you want to share?
I could certainly share some recent ones. If it's okay with you, I'd like to share one that's a little bit older. It's probably not probably, it is definitely the most impactful for me. As a workforce consultant, I had an opportunity to support a very large customer for our in-house business. And this was very early on in my return to Randstad. I was given the opportunity to create a wage analysis and ultimately a recommendation for this customer to do a wage increase. This was a project that took several months and several attempts and several pitches and a lot of supporting data, but we were able to do a 10% increase for 700 plus employees across the board. And obviously that was a $1 million+ impact to our gross margin, but it was also taking people from $10 an hour to $11 an hour. And when you think about the impact of that on 700 plus households, I get a little choked up talking about it, right? Because it's just such a huge impact. Business aside, right? Like, of course, it looked great on our P&L, but that aside, like, that changed the way that people did Christmas. It changed the way that people bought groceries. It changed people's lives. And to be a part of that it was incredible.
I've got chills. You connected all the dots on what it means to be a partner for talent. Thank you, Trey. And thanks for being here. I really appreciate you sharing your story, because I know it's helpful. I know there's somebody out there that's listening to this at some point in the future that's wondering what their career options are. And they can learn from your experience, and maybe they don't have to leave and come back, because it's really hard to imagine a place that you can invest your talent that matters as much as the work that we get to do here. It's really a privilege.
I absolutely believe that. I think the last thing I would say, if it's okay with you, is just, to anybody that is maybe a little uncertain what that path looks like, just don't be afraid to ask, right? Like, don't be afraid to ask your leader. Don't be afraid to chat the person or email the person that's on that job posting that you saw on the internal job board. Like, don't be afraid to go for it. Like, what's the worst thing that's going to happen?
Right?
You get a new contact, right? Like, you meet someone new. I've never had a bad experience, reaching out to anyone, trying to understand what it is that we do here. We are a huge organization. And I'd say that even in the vast network that I have, I barely scratched the surface with the different areas that we cover. So just don't be afraid to ask questions. There's something for everybody here at Randstad. I truly believe that.
Amazing advice. Thank you for that. And thanks too for being here.
Thank you. I appreciate it.